Hello and welcome. I'm Mariana Trapnell, President and Chief Excel Geek here at Accelerations and creator of the 5 Steps to Fast Reports method. Last week we covered one of the key formulas in the 5 Steps to Fast Reports method, VLOOKUP. To be honest though, we really only grazed the surface of its power, and there are a number of gotchas to be aware of when you're using the formula as well. So today I've got a couple more tips and tricks for you on the VLOOKUP formula. And as I mentioned in the note, even if you're an experienced user of this formula, there's one trick you may not be aware of. It's a real time saver when you're creating reports and analyses where you use the data again and again, such as for data migration files or monthly reports. So I'll cover that piece first. Then, for those of you who are still getting comfortable with the VLOOKUP formula, stick around to the end because I've got a couple more tips and tricks to share with you after that as well. So, without further ado, let's take a look at the first trick. Alright, so here we have the file that we were working with last week. And as you can see, we've got our position where we had our VLOOKUP formula created last week. Now, what I've decided to do is I want to add in the city and region to this data as well for the employee so that I know what region they're selling from and I can kind of associate that to the customers and figure out if we're working in the right areas. So I'm going to go back to my sales team data and just take a look and make sure I've got that information. So I've got it here. I've got my city, and a bit further over, yes, there I've got my region as well. Now, as we talked about last week, VLOOKUP looks at the first column in the range, and I've highlighted that here so we remember which one it is. So that's our first column in the range we're looking up. And then we've got our title over here, and then our city and our region. Okay. Now, one thing that could happen in the future is I might decide that it doesn't really make sense in this particular report to have the email address right beside the name. It might make more sense to have it over kind of with this contact info over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to cut that and I'm going to move it over here. So now this report is looking a little more reasonable in terms of its layout. But what's happened is that now if I look at my first column, and again this is column C, but it's my first column in my VLOOKUP range. Column C is 1, 2, now my job title is in column 3. But if I go look at my VLOOKUP formula, it's now broken actually because I moved that column around. So let's just double check what's going on here. Sales team C to E. C to E, C, D, E only has 3 columns, so really I want to go to F, and now it's actually going to work again. But instead of my position, it's returning what was in column 4, which is the city. So if we go look at that, 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's no good. Now, a quick way of dealing with this so that if I move columns around again in the future is to use the column reference. So instead of putting a 4 here, I want to actually return the actual column number that it's in. And to do that, I'm actually going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Alright. Now I've actually hard-coded these in, so if I do move columns around in the future, I'd have to kind of renumber these and just make sure that they're actually going in the right order still. But this is kind of handy because what I can now do is in my VLOOKUP formula, instead of putting a 4 in here, I can actually delete that and instead refer to whatever is in the column or the row above my job title, which is that column that I want. So that's E1. And in this case, because I want to hold that constant, I'm going to put dollar signs in front of the E and the 1 so that that doesn't move around on me when I copy it to other rows and other columns. So to do that, you can either type in the dollar sign, you could actually go here and go dollar and dollar, or to make life easier, I'm just going to hit, when I'm on this piece, I'm going to hit F4, and you can see that's actually put dollar signs in for me. And I'm going to hit enter. So now you can see it's actually returning my position again, and when I copy it down, it's going to return the right positions for each of those folks. So that's the first trick I wanted to show you. And like I say, if I then move my columns around again, and I for some reason decide that I want to put the phone number over beside the job title because it's more important than the city, then you can see my numbers moved around on me, but I'm going to renumber 1, 2, 3, and I'm just going to fill by using that little fill handle, and it's going to fill in the numbers for me. So now, let's see, job title is still number 3, but my phone number is number 4 now instead. So in this case, it doesn't affect my VLOOKUP because that's still number 3, but you can see it's still referring to the right cell anyway, and it's going to return the right job title. Okay, so that's the first trick. So for those of you who know VLOOKUP already, there you go. That's hopefully something new for you. Now, driving right along, for those of you who aren't as familiar with VLOOKUP, one thing you can do is you can actually copy VLOOKUP to the next column over. Okay, but what it's going to do is Excel tries to be a little too helpful sometimes, and it's actually changed it. You can see it's changing from B2 to C2 to D2 because I'm kind of moving over my columns. And that's not really what I want to do. I want to continue referring to my employee to find that in the sales team range. And there's another point. Sales team is now looking at E to I, and that doesn't sound right. I think it was C to G. So if I try and look up E to I, that first column in my range is now E, which is my job title, which isn't going to be very helpful for me in terms of looking up Anne's information. So I need to hold that constant as well. So what we want to do is the same kind of thing. For the VLOOKUP, we want to hold B constant. We always want it to look in column B, and then we want it to move down the range. So for instance, if I go down B3, B4, B5, B6, so I want it to always be looking in B, but actually look at those rows. So again, I'm going to hit F4, but that's going to hold my row constant as well. So I'm going to hit F4 again, and that's going to hold my row constant, so it's always going to look at 2, but it's going to change from B to C to D, which isn't what I want either. So I'll hit F4 again. Okay, now I have my $ in front of B, and that should work for me. And then same thing on C to G here. I'm going to highlight those, hit F4, and those I can hold constant just as they are. So $1 in front of C, $1 in front of G, we're good to go. And like I said earlier, E is going to hold constant there. So I'm going to copy that down. I'm just using Control-Shift down arrow and then a Control-V to paste it. And okay, so that's my position. That still looks good. And if I copy this over now, okay, it's still pulling my position, but it is pulling the position and not giving me an NA, which is a good start. Now the only issue is that I'm referring to E1 here, which on my sales team data, you can see that sales team E1. I'm just going to delete that, and I'm going to instead refer to my city, which is there. And I'll just mention, you can actually drag this VLOOKUP information bar out of your way if you just kind of grab onto the edge of it and drag it up. I find that it's always getting in the way of the column labels. So, okay, so back to where we were. Sales team G1 is my city column number. But again, I need to hit F4 so that that stays constant. Hit enter. Okay, now that's returning a city. Copy that over again. And instead of G, I know my region is, well, I don't know my region, hang on. Region is in column J. So I could actually point to it, or I could just change this to a J. Oops. And you can see this actually only goes to G, so that's not going to help me. So I need to go to at least J in order for my VLOOKUP to actually return something from column J. There we go. Now they're in North Alberta. So that was about 3 different gotchas right there. Okay, so we're going to double click this to get it all the way to the bottom. And you can see now we've got our city, we've got our region for everyone here. And again, it's changing depending on the row number. So we've got, now we're referring to B58. We're still looking at C to G and E1, C to G and G1, and then this one we actually changed to C to J and J1. So in theory, I could actually just copy this back this direction. And of course I would have to change this back to G and this back to E in order to get the right fields. But that initial range that you're pulling from doesn't really matter as long as it includes the column that you want to return, as well as the first column is the column that matches what you're looking up in column B here. Okay, so hopefully that made a bit of sense, and I think we'll stop there for today. And just want to mention again, try using VLOOKUP with your own data as soon as possible, just to remind yourself how it works. And then of course, leave a comment on the page below to tell me, was this video useful for you? If you've used it before, how have you used it? And are there other Excel topics you'd like me to cover as well? And then of course, if you haven't already done so, sign up to receive future tips and tricks at accelerations.com, which you can find at accelerations.com. Just scroll to the bottom and just send me tips down here. Okay. So like I say, that ends the session for today, and thanks for stopping by.